Well, good morning, and it's a pleasure to be in Stoke today as we launch our Labour campaign for this year's vitally important local elections. And I'm so proud to be joined by my shadow cabinet colleagues, the party chair, Ian Lavery, Ruth Smeeth and Gareth Snell, MP, and councillors, candidates, and so many others today. Because these elections are crucially important. It is Labour councillors, day in and day out, who show how we can translate our values into action. Action that improves public services and betters people's lives. Whether it's building the homes we need or looking after the most vulnerable in society, or providing and maintaining community services for young and old alike. Labour councils and Labour councillors are the last defenders of the most vulnerable in society. You are the people who those in need turn to when they need it. And because of that, these elections are so vital. Now, when we come to power nationally, it will be local government that has to deliver many of Labour's key manifesto commitments. And I'm fond of reminding my shadow cabinet colleagues that actually 44% of the commitments we made in the 2017 general election will fall either directly or indirectly on English local government to deliver. So to fix our broken political system, which leaves people feeling disconnected and disillusioned by Westminster politics, we need to put local people and communities at the heart of our national decision making. And that's why I announced recently, as the Shadow Communities and Local Government Secretary, that when Labour regains power nationally, we will create a local government commission made up of councillors from every region, every authority type and every political party. Because for 9 years, ministers have sat in meetings in Whitehall and they've cut the funding to councils hundreds of miles away, never having to see the library that is closed, or the potholes that go unfixed, or the elderly people who go without care as a result of their cuts. And because over the last 9 years, we have seen unprecedented levels of cuts to local councils across England. The fact is, between 2010 and 2020, councils will have lost 60 pence out of every £1 of funding that the government provides for our local neighbourhood services. 9 in the 10 most deprived councils in this country have seen cuts almost 3 times greater than the national average. And this has left our local services today facing a funding gap of £3.2 billion. And if left unchecked, by 2025, the gap facing local councils in England will rise to £7.8 billion. So a Labour government will stand up for our local communities and will empower local councils and local people to change their neighbourhoods and communities for the better. We will invest in new affordable homes to rent and buy. A Labour government will join up services from home to hospital with properly integrated health and social care services. We will make our streets safer again. We will invest in young people and our children's future. And we will devolve powers and funding on transport, on economic development, and on community initiatives so that you can deliver your own priorities. Now, I know it's an extremely challenging time for local government. And in the face of everything that you in this room are facing, I want to say to those of you who are our local councillors and candidates, You are an inspiration to the Labour movement. Whether it's facing up to the cuts, or campaigning in the freezing cold, in the rain and in the snow, or giving up more time to help your local communities than there are hours in the day, just know this. Together we will change our local communities and our country for the better, like it has ever been before. And together we can win on May the 2nd. Together we will rebuild Britain for the many and not the few. So go out from here, and on May the 2nd, let's have more Labour councillors, more Labour councils putting our vision into practice, making our priorities a reality and defending those communities and services that need Labour like never before. And it's now my great pleasure to introduce to the stage Barbara Keeley MP, the Shadow Cabinet Minister for Mental Health and Social Care. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew, for that introduction, and I'm delighted to be here, as the whole team is delighted, to help launch Labour's local election campaign. It's so important, as Andrew has just said, that we support our fantastic, hard-working Labour councillors and our great campaigning candidates here in Stoke-on-Trent, along, of course, with our colleagues, Gareth and Ruth. So that's why we're here, to help elect a Labour council, and Stoke deserves a Labour council. I know how important it is to have a Labour-run council because I helped run one in Trafford for 9 years. We know, as I think Andrew has touched on, that Labour councils are fighting to help vulnerable people despite those Tory cuts, and they're particularly hitting mental health and social care services, which is my brief. They're doing so much damage, not just in Stoke-on-Trent, but right across the country. The facts are clear. 8 years of cuts to council budgets have hollowed out the social care system. It means that vulnerable adults, old and young, are getting less care than they used to, or worse, getting no care at all. 2/3 of people in Stoke who request care don't receive any care whatsoever. And many families these days cannot find a place in a care home for a relative with advanced dementia because homes are now in a position where they can cherry-pick the people to whom they give care. And this lack of care heaps pressure upon unpaid family carers. And so many of those carers are already struggling to balance work and caring. Far too often as well, the social care that people do get is just not good enough. Here in Stoke, 1/4 of social care providers get the lowest quality ratings for the care they provide. And cuts, of course, mean that underpaid, undervalued and overworked care staff cannot give the care they want to give. And that's true for councils too. Social workers, it's been Social Worker Day recently, social workers are overworked too. Now, I know that a Labour government will ease this crisis, but we also know the difference that a Labour-run council can make, even in these times of austerity. If I look at my own council, which is Salford, we are paying our care staff a real living wage. Those are Labour values put in practice, already improving lives, benefiting both the people with care needs and the staff who care for them, and of course, benefiting unpaid family carers. Too many family carers are also being left to fend for themselves. Here in Stoke, the number of carers getting council support has fallen by nearly 1,000 since 2016. People just left to manage. And that's why we're working so hard across the country to bring in the Labour government we all desperately need. Because the next Labour government will invest more in social care, enough to pay all care staff a real living wage, to give carers the better support that they need to carry on caring, and to give councils the resources they need to help more people to get the good quality care that they depend on. They depend on it to live with dignity. They depend on it to live independently. They depend on it to live the lives they want to live. So thank you. That's what is there for the future. Now I want to introduce my colleague, Angela Rayner.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here today. But I'm pretty upset today because our Prime Minister chose in the last 24 hours to fan the flames of division, of hatred, of nastiness. At a time when we're all upset, and quite rightly so, here in Stoke-on-Trent, where this week the Ofsted report into children's services says that children are being put at risk, when 1 in 5 parents can't get the school for their children that they want, when we know that older people are told they're living just a little bit too long and are not getting the care they deserve, when people are looking for answers, when people are looking for us to come together, unfortunately, our Prime Minister has decided to talk about division and not bring the country together. Well, I think the local elections give us an opportunity. They give us an opportunity to talk about what our Labour values are. And our Labour values are about love thy neighbour, not blame thy neighbour. Work together to create the type of society where our children, any child, is not put at risk. Where our older people who have fought and worked hard for our country are given the support that they deserve. Where our bins can be collected as well as support is given to the most vulnerable. Where we all see the value in every single member of our society. And that's what's at stake in our local elections now. We've seen councils they've lost, decimated, absolutely decimated the services, the youth services, the adult education, the colleges, the support that all of our communities need. The Tories know the cost of everything and the value of nothing. So we've got to send a message. We don't want your hostile environment. We don't want Theresa May's go home fans. And we don't want nastiness. We want to bring our communities together. We want fairness. We want to get on with the job of government and investing in schools, investing in hospitals, investing in local government, investing in our services, and giving councillors the powers as well as the obligations to carry out what our citizens deserve, and that's a more fairer, equal society. And hopefully, within these local elections on the 2nd of May, with our fantastic councillors we have here and our fantastic candidates, as well as across our country, we can send a clear message to the Tories, is you're on notice. We'll have a Labour government next that will invest, and we'll have a Labour council, and we'll have Labour councillors up and down this country that will put people first. Thank you. Now, I haven't had the opportunity yet to be in government, kind of hoping that comes soon, because I'm bored of opposition. But the person who I'm going to introduce today has been in a Labour government, the last Labour government that changed my life, that gave me opportunities. And I'm incredibly grateful for those people that served, including John Healey, who was a local government minister and a housing minister, and is now our fantastic Shadow Secretary of State for Housing. So please give a warm welcome to John Healey.
Thank you, Angela. And thank you all for joining this launch of our local elections campaign for 2019. You know, if you talk to people about housing now, nearly 3 in 4 will tell you there's a housing crisis. And they're right, because everyone knows someone who can't get the home they need or they aspire to. They'll say it's getting worse, not better, and they're right, because people have seen now 9 years of failure from Conservative ministers since 2010, on all fronts on housing. 1 million people on council waiting lists across the country. Yet Tory ministers last year backed fewer than 1,000 new social rented homes. 600 people died homeless in our country last year. Yet Tory ministers have cut by 2/3 the special funding for specialist housing, including the homeless. Private rents soaring well ahead of wages, yet Tory ministers refuse to give private renters new rights to control rents, to longer tenancies, to better minimum standards. Nearly 1 million fewer under 45s now owning a home than they did in 2010. Yet Tory ministers stripping councils of the powers to force big developers to build a better mix of affordable homes for local residents. And of course, when our councils in every part of the country must be at the heart of any plan to fix the housing crisis, they've cut their funding, they've weakened their powers, and they've stopped them from building new council homes. So these local elections on May the 2nd are the chance for people to send a very clear, strong message to Theresa May and the Tories that they want politicians who will fix the housing crisis. They want a political party that will help with the housing pressures and problems that they face. And in this really toxic Brexit period, when people are impatient and angry and frustrated with politics in general, let no one say, you politicians, you're all the same. Let no one say it makes no difference which party is in power, nationally or locally. Let me tell you this. Angela mentioned the last Labour government. That last Labour year in 2010, I was the last Labour housing minister. If in this country we'd continued building new social rented homes at the rate we were building in 2010 when we lost office, do you know there would be more than 180,000 available now? That's more than enough for every household in temporary accommodation, every person sleeping rough on our streets, every individual in every homeless hostel. And if you want to bring it closer to home, in this wider West Midlands region, there are 21 councils run by the Tories, at least until May the 2nd. 21 Tory councils who between them have more than 54,000 people on their council waiting lists. And do you know how many new social rented homes those 21 councils between them started last year? 580. Well, at that rate, it's going to take them more than 90 years to build the homes just to house the people who are already on the waiting lists. And the figures tell us, with Labour councils, you pay less, you get more. You pay less and you get more homes built. More council homes, more housing association homes, more homes in total. But of course, the scale of this crisis requires a Labour government. It requires a plan, which we have, to build 1 million new low-cost homes over the first decade, with the biggest council house building programme for nearly 40 years at the heart of that programme. It requires a plan to legislate in the first year to give private renters new rights to control rents, to longer tenancies, to better legal minimum standards. And it requires a national Labour government with a plan to end rough sleeping homelessness within the first 5 years. And of course, we'll back councils with new funding to build new council housing, with new powers to regulate private landlords, with new rules to force big developers to build more homes for local people. Now we're in the Shadow Cabinet. Down there we're leading Labour's charge to try and oppose the worst of what the Tories are doing, to promote Labour's alternative. But while ever we remain in opposition in Westminster, then people's best hope, people's best protection are good Labour councillors and good Labour councils. So people's best hope is to elect on May the 2nd more Labour councillors and more Labour councils. Good luck to you all, wherever you're standing, wherever you're going to win. Thank you very much. And now it's my pleasure to hand on to Diane Abbott, who is leading that charge, that Labour case, that Labour argument, that Labour campaign down in the House of Commons as our Shadow Labour Home Secretary. Diane.
Well, good morning. It's a great pleasure to be here to launch our local government election campaign. I was a councillor once, and I believe that there is no more important role in the Labour family. And until such time as we get a Labour government, which I believe may be sooner than you think, Labour councillors and the Labour councillors were able to elect, the further Labour councillors were able to elect on May the 2nd, will be the front line of protection for our communities. Some of you will have seen the Prime Minister Theresa May on the television yesterday outside Number 10, bold as brass, blaming members of Parliament for the mess we are currently in over Brexit. Well, let me remind you, if you need reminding, at every point, Theresa May takes ownership of the current mess. It was she who chose to trigger the process to come out of the EU without the faintest idea how she was going to do it. It was she who decided that she knew what communities like Stoke meant when they voted to leave. It was she who chose the people that she put in charge: Liam Fox, David Davis, Boris Johnson. I rest my case. And it is she who has driven these negotiations at every stage. Not only did she not reach out to the Labour Party, because in September, the leader of the Labour Party at party conference offered to help her with delivering Brexit. Not only has she not reached out to the Labour Party, she hasn't reached out to sections of her own party. So let me tell you, if Theresa May wants to know why Brexit is now such a mess, she needs to look in the mirror. When she first became Prime Minister, she talked about burning injustices. Well, let me tell you what a burning injustice is. It's a burning injustice if you're a victim of crime and you dial 999 and you have to wait not hours, but for the next day to get a response. It's a burning injustice if you see crime down the end of your road, round the corner, and you contact the police and you can't get a response. But this isn't the fault of our hard-working police officers. With the best will in the world, if you don't have the officer strength, police cannot respond effectively to crime, particularly serious crime. And since 2010, Tory governments have cut over 500 police officers from the Staffordshire workforce. There is now the lowest number of staff's police since comparable records began in 1979. When it comes to law and order, the Tories talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. And if on the doorstep, people are raising issues around crime with you, you need to remind them of the appalling Tory record. You need to remind them that police stations in Stoke are closing their doors to the public. You need to remind them of the cuts in policing, because you cannot keep people safe on the cheap. Just as austerity has harmed our schools, austerity has harmed social care, austerity has harmed housing, austerity has harmed the capacity of our police officers to keep people safe. So if you live in a community where people are concerned about violent crime and whether it's being properly investigated, if you live in a community that is blighted by low-level but persistent crime and antisocial behaviour, then the Tories are to blame. That is just one of the reasons why we need a Labour government. I believe that we have a tremendous offer on the doorstep in the forthcoming local government elections. I believe we will make gains. I believe that authorities, where we're not necessarily in control, we will be in control of or after May the 2nd. And I also believe that maybe, given the chaos in Westminster, the next time I come to Stoke, we will have a Labour government and Jeremy Corbyn in number 10. And but the first step will be these local government elections. So we're here, the shadow cabinet members here and others, to show solidarity and to say the whole Labour movement is behind those of you fighting these local authority elections. So, without further ado, let me introduce one of our excellent Labour councillors, Councillor Mohammed Pervez, the leader of the Labour group.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and I am delighted to see all of you here today in Stoke-on-Trent, and I would like to thank our National Labour Party for choosing Stoke-on-Trent to launch the local government campaign for the council elections on the 2nd of May. The Conservative government's austerity agenda is the ideological choice to make ordinary people pay the price for the mistakes that they did not make. It is an excuse to attack our public services and our communities to benefit the privileged few at the expense of the many. Its effects have been devastating in some of the most deprived areas, including Stoke-on-Trent. Around £200 million have been cut from the council's budget since 2010. And if this wasn't enough, we have had 4 years of the Conservatives and City Independents running our local council, passing on these cuts to those least able to shoulder them. Vital services to the most vulnerable have been cut. The CQC report highlighted older people being neglected and left in their own beds for days. Roads have been left to crumble, and public transport links have been severed. And our young people have been abandoned. It couldn't be any clearer in the Ofsted report released this week. Children in this city are not being protected, leaving them at risk of significant harm. This is all down to the choices made by the Conservative Party nationally and the Conservative and City Independents in our local council. However, there is an alternative. We have a Labour government in waiting to end austerity and bring communities back together. And here we have a Labour council in waiting to bring back hope to our city. A Labour win in Stoke-on-Trent on May the 2nd will mean picking up the broken pieces left by the Tories and City Independents and rebuilding our towns, our communities, and our services. We will protect our children from the risk of harm and support the poorest in our communities facing crisis situations. We will invest in education and neighbourhood youth services. We will create hundreds of opportunities for our young people through a pioneering apprenticeship programme. We will build hundreds of new homes every year, including council housing, social housing, and bungalows. We will repair potholes within 7 days of them being reported by our residents. And we will sort out the broken roads left behind by the Tories and City Independents. We will bring back to life our town centres through support for local businesses and by freezing car parking charges for the next 4 years. And we will establish a £3 million community wealth fund to give back to local organisations who work tirelessly for the benefit of our residents. We will also get the basics right, such as street cleaning and fly tipping, and ending the Tory rat tax and charges for waste disposal. And when we get a Labour government, we will be able to do even more. And this is why it gives me a great pleasure to introduce the chair of our Labour Party and our national campaign coordinator, Ian Lavery.
Well, thanks very much for that kind introduction, Mohammed. You know, it's a privilege to be here in Stoke as the chair of the Labour Party. It's great to be in the company of the wonderful people of Stoke, with councillors, with local representatives, with members, with non-members, with the excellent MPs we have in Ruth and Gareth, and of course with my good colleagues from the Shattuck Cabinet. We're here to launch the campaign for the local elections. And you know, Jeremy would have loved to have been here, but he's in Brussels fixing Brexit. But he has asked me to pass on a message. And Jeremy says, I'm sorry I can't be with you today. This Tory government's catastrophic handling of Brexit has plunged us into a full-scale national crisis. So I've been meeting with MPs from across the political spectrum to try and break the deadlock. And I'm in Brussels today to try and find a way forward. People are fed up with the vital issues that affect their daily lives totally being ignored whilst the government falls apart over Brexit. So in the local election campaign, we're going to shine a spotlight on the damage the Tories are doing to local communities with their savage cuts. They've divided our country and entrenched an economy that only rewards those at the very top. And Labour will rebuild local communities so that they work for everyone. Let's take our message out to every voter that Labour will end austerity and shift wealth and power in our country so it's not in the hands of the many, not the few. So that's a message from Jeremy. And you know, he's absolutely right in what he says. And on the 2nd of May, we'll all get a choice. You'll get the chance to vote on the future of your neighbourhood. How things are where you live. Whether you're okay with your community being run down, whether you're okay with more homeless people on the streets, or whether you're okay with schools sending begging letters to parents to buy essential equipment. Because, you know, this is the devastation being inflicted on our communities, and it's severe. You know, I see it every day in my constituency in the northeast of England, very similar to here in Stoke. The cases my staff and I've got to deal with tell their own story. The disabled veteran who's got mental health issues, who's had the benefits slashed. I had a young man in the other day who fell through the cracks in the fostering system, is now sleeping on the streets, hasn't got a roof over his head or a penny in his pocket. And I know who's to blame for this. It's the cruel cuts being imposed by the Conservatives, especially on, as my colleagues have mentioned, local councils. And these elections are your chance, are our chance to send out a powerful message that we're not okay with your library, with your Sure Start Centre, or with your swimming pool, or with your park being lost. You're not okay with the high street dying as the shops stand empty and vacant. You're not okay with streets being unsafe. You shouldn't be okay with any of this at all, because it doesn't have to be this way. It's about values, colleagues. It's about values. And let me say that the Labour cares about our communities. We want them to thrive. We are the Labour Party. And as been said by my friends, we'll invest money to make it possible. The Tories. Well, let me give you an illustration of their values. They've cut half, literally half, the real terms funding to councils from central government since 2010. Why is it at the same time austerity has increased the demand for local services? And the impact isn't felt equally across the UK. Instead, the poorest areas and the most vulnerable people are being hit the hardest. Isn't that absolutely appalling? You know, few statistics. 9 of the 10 poorest council areas in the country have seen cuts of almost 3 times the national average. They're shifting the balance of resources from hard-up areas to affluent areas. That's that massive shift of wealth. Council taxes increasing, it's going up, even though councils can provide fewer services. So people are paying much more to get much less. And meanwhile, the Tories at the same time are giving huge tax breaks and giveaways to their wealthy friends and, of course, the biggest corporations. I touched on homelessness just before. And we have got choices, and the choices we make have got consequences. Everyone knows that the number of people sleeping rough has rocketed since the Tories came to power. You see it in the streets, right across the Midlands, right across the North. In London, homelessness is an absolute outrage. You know what we should never forget, ever, is that we are the 5th richest country in the world. Why can we not provide homes for our own people? And at the weekend, you know, I slept rough for a night to support the YMCA in Northumberland. And I can tell you, I'm a former miner, and I thought it was quite tough. This was tough, by the way. And I knew at 9 o'clock in the morning, I was getting back into a hot bed after having a wonderfully lovely breakfast. The people who are on the streets at this moment in time aren't in that position. They've got this to deal with day in, day out, week in, week out. It was awful. It was tough. It was windy. It was pouring with rain. I was absolutely freezing cold. But it did give me some understanding of what these people who I've mentioned face every night. It made us so angry that so many have to suffer this type of treatment. And it made us even more determined that we would stand up to this national scandal. It's shameful, friends, really is shameful, that according to Shelter, more than 130,000 children are in temporary accommodation. Remember what I said before? We are the 5th richest country in the world. We've got plenty of finances. It just depends on how politicians decide to distribute the wealth that this country makes. Comrades, colleagues, Labour will tackle the root cause of homelessness. We'll tackle the housing crisis, and we'll build social housing, and we'll continue in the vein of my friend, what my friend John Healy mentioned before. We've got Labour councils like Wolverhampton and Sheffield who are already building council houses, including houses specially designed for disabled and elderly people. This is exactly what we need. Homes for our people to live in. Not just investment opportunities for the rich, many who don't even live in this country. So, colleagues, we then look at the issues we've raised about older people. You know, it's often the young who pay the price of the housing crisis. But many older people are being hammered by austerity too. Take social care, for example. And you know, any one of us here in this audience could end up dependent on social care, especially towards the end of our lives, either in a care home or relying on visits from care workers. Social care is a vital service. After working their whole lives, people deserve dignity in their old age. And yet, because of the callous Conservative cuts, too many are denied that dignity. Here's a statistic. Almost 90 people a day die while waiting for social care to be arranged for them. Think about that. Elderly people who need care are dying before they get it. Almost 90 a day. What a shame. What a scourge on society. But you know, the Conservatives have washed their hands off this crisis. They haven't got any solutions, and they've got even less compassion. Labour will build a new national care service. Loneliness among older people has become an epidemic. And of course, people feel isolated. When in their own communities, the leisure centres have gone, the community centres have gone, the post offices have closed, and the libraries have shut. Talking about libraries, they are a community treasure for all. But hundreds of libraries have closed since 2010. It's pure and simple vandalism. Loneliness is made worse by the loss of, for example, so many bus routes. So Labour will make it easier for authorities to create public bus services, as we've done in Warrington and in Nottingham. You know, it makes me feel sick. Sick to the pit of my stomach when older people tell us that they're frightened to leave the house because of a rise in violent crime. Diane mentioned it. Is it any wonder that if you cut 21,000 police officers, as the Tories have done, that people feel less secure? And if you strip out the youth centres, you cut mental health care, and take away the support services that people rely on, then we shouldn't be surprised to see more crime. You cannot keep people safe on the cheap. Labour will hire 10,000 extra police officers. We'll boost neighbourhood policing and rebuild the services that underpin a safe community. So, friends, across large parts of our country, people feel ignored by the political class, and I think we all understand that. Who can blame them? Many people have been robbed of their future by a total lack of understanding and a lack of community investment. You can see it. You can see it in the boarded up stores here in Stoke. You can see it on the high streets. We can see betting shops cashing in on the desperation. Labour will change our economy so that it works in the interests of the many. The people who do the work, the people who pay their taxes, and not the few who hoard the wealth and dodge their taxes. And we need Labour councils to represent your community to the government, instead of Conservative councils that represent the Tory government to your community. Friends, local government and the vital public services it provides have been hollowed out by savage Tory cuts that have hit, they've hit the poorest hardest. Decades of neglect combined with 9 years of austerity has led to rising crime, high street decline, and the loss of many of our community key services. The Tories' cuts to schools, to the police, to social care, homelessness prevention, and children's services are putting family prosperity and Britain's future at risk. We're desperate to elect as many Labour councillors as possible on the 2nd of May, to send a message to this rotten government that real change is needed and austerity must end. Colleagues, Labour will rebuild our country with investment in services and communities so they can thrive once again instead of more of the same failed austerity and cuts with the Tories. It's no secret what makes a strong community. It's simple. Good homes, good schools, good hospitals, a GP you can get an appointment with, safe streets, places where people can come together, a vibrant high street, leisure centres, art centres, and reliable public transport. A community where there's security, where there's togetherness, where there's joy, where there's happiness. A community where everyone, not just a few, can flourish. And that's what Labour stands for. So vote Labour on May the 2nd and we will rebuild your community and rebuild this country for the many and not the few. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, now you get the double act. We're going to do a short round of questions and answers. Now, we've got 3 from the media first, and then I'll take another round of 3. So can we have Oliver Milne from the Daily Mirror, please? Oh, just get a microphone. There you go.
Labour's front bench is committed, when the time is right, to backing calls for a second referendum and the people's vote. How do you communicate in these local elections to people in communities like Stoke up and down the country that have backed Leave that you're listening?
Get the next question.
Okay, Philip Corrigan from the Stoke Sentinel. Where's Philip?
Yeah, Phil Corrigan, Stoke Sentinel. Stoke-on-Trent used to be fairly safe electoral grounds for Labour for decades, but you lost control of the council 4 years ago, and you lost one of the parliamentary seats in Stoke-on-Trent for the first time in like 80 years, a couple of years ago. What do you put that down to, and what do you think you can do to change that situation?
And then Josh Payne from the Press Association.
Hi. A couple of questions from me. Basically, do you agree with certain people that Jeremy Corbyn's actions yesterday were juvenile in walking out on the meeting? And secondly, is this a sort of thing we can expect from Labour now, to not listen to other MPs' voices in times of national crisis?
Okay, Ian.
I'll touch on each of those ones. The people's vote, Oliver, it's a very important issue. The Labour Party have been absolutely clear from day one with regard to the way in which we would approach the Brexit issue. By the way, let me just say that this whole entire issue of Brexit and the mess we're in is due to Theresa May and a catastrophic cabinet and her members. And it isn't the making of the Labour Party. We, in some ways, are having to sweep up behind this. And it's a disaster, let me say. But what we have said, and we've been very clear from the manifesto, where we said we would respect the outcome of the referendum. And then we had a conference in Liverpool, the annual conference, where there was, it was the biggest conference we've had in memory. 13,500 people, delegates at that conference. We had a motion, a composite motion, because Brexit is so toxic, it's splitting communities. I'll tell you what, even in this room here, we'll have virtually the 50-50 split on whether we should leave or whether we should remain. But when you speak to people, they've all got the same values at heart. But this issue with Brexit is very, very toxic. And what we've got a challenge. The challenge the Labour Party are up for. That's why Jeremy's in Brussels and not here today. He's trying to bring people together. He's trying to bring everybody together here in the likes of Stoke and in the likes of my constituency. So the issue with regards to a people's vote is that it's always been part of the agenda because of a composite motion in September of 2018 at the Labour Party conference. We've said we'll go through a number of issues and including and being left on the table as a people's vote. We've never denied that. I'm from a constituency which voted 70% to leave. And I'm a Remain MP. But I understand the challenges we've got. So with regard to a people's vote, we first of all would need to know what a people's vote would be. But all I can say is that I understand when you knock on the door here in Stoke and you explain to people what the situation is with regard to Brexit. Labour's on your side. Labour is trying to bring everybody together. We're trying to get a better deal right across the piece. We want Brexit, but we want the Labour Brexit based on the 5 pillars and based on the best way forward for working people, for the environment, for security, in harmony with the EU. And that's the way we'll progress forward on that. With regard to Josh and Jeremy being juvenile, you might perhaps wish to say that Jeremy was juvenile. What I would say is that Jeremy had agreed with the Prime Minister a certain criteria for a meeting, and she broke the agreement immediately. Jeremy spoke to Theresa May almost immediately after the meeting last night. There was a lengthy conversation. Jeremy put a whole number of points to Theresa May. Not to go over old ground again, but the reality is Jeremy's trying to resolve this in the best interests of everybody, not just the 48%, not just the 52%. We need to get together. We need to get rid of this horrible hatred, toxic nature which is transcending right through our communities, and that's what Jeremy's doing. To call him juvenile is, I think, widely inaccurate, and I'm being extremely polite. With regard to Philip, with regard to what Philip's saying about lost seats, councils, you win seats, councils, you lost seats. We've got some fantastic councillors here in Stoke. We've got some fantastic prospective councillors here in Stoke. We've got them right across the country. And you know what we'll be doing? We'll be knocking on people's doors. We'll be discussing things face to face with people in the streets. We'll be discussing things in the high street, stalls, door to door, because we need to be listening to people. And we will, the councillors, prospective councillors, Labour members, on a mission. We've got to change where we just knock on people's doors and just say, hello, I'm from the Labour Party. Did you vote for us last time? Will you vote for us next time? We've got to engage in the issues which are facing local people, which Mohammed eloquently explained in his contribution. So we're engaging with people, and I'm confident now. I'm confident that we've got that bag of resources where we can actually knock on people's doors. And you know, sometimes you used to knock on people's... I've been campaigning for years. And you knock on people's doors and you say, well, what's the difference between yourselves and the others? And the answer was, well, we're not as bad as the rest. Things have changed, you know. Things have changed under Jerry Corbyn's leadership because we have got the answers. We have got the solutions. We have reached out. We've got a manifesto both nationally and we've got the answers for local people. And that's the difference. We can be proud to put the Labour rosette on, knock on the door and say, I'm from the Labour Party. Let's have a discussion. This is how we're different. This is the difference we'll make to you. This is the difference we'll make to your family, to your workplace, to the environment, and to your community. So I think that is a big change. And that's how we will, and that's how I believe that we will make significant gains in the forthcoming elections. The Labour Party basically is under new management. We're heading in a different direction, and it is very appealing. We've got 500,000 members. I think that says something.
Okay, we'll take another round of three if you want to indicate. So I've got the lady there, the gentleman there, and is there somebody in that block? So the gentleman there. If you say who you are when you get the microphone as well.
Do you want to tell me?
My name's Amy Cordaliwell, and my MP is Colleen Fletcher from Coventry. Food security is a problem, and what are Labour going to do to win farmers' votes? Because farmers and the farming community has always been under kind of like this idea of conservative rule, and Labour hasn't said much about farms and farming communities, and they're up for grabs at the moment, just so you know.
Thank you.
What's that mean?
Gentleman. Oh, there he is.
Hello, my name is Azim and I'm the Digital Marketing Manager here at the university. Firstly, thank you very much for choosing Stoke-on-Trent to launch this campaign. Before I ask the question that I'm going to ask, I'd like to speak to yourselves directly first and say that in the very near future, you all are going to have the opportunity to vote for this pathetic example of a deal that Theresa May has put forward for the 7,000th time. Stay strong, vote no. I've read yesterday, and I hope that I've read wrong, that some Labour MPs are starting to change their minds and are going to back that. Don't do it. Please don't do it. That's just my 2 pence. The question I wanted to ask you is that we've got a Tory, thank you. The question that I wanted to ask is, we've got Jack Brereton now, who I'm sure you all know who he is, famously lied about how our MPs voted, misspelled Brexit. I'm sure if you asked him how to spell his own name, he'd probably get that wrong as well. But the facts are facts. The seat was lost, 663 votes. That is not a huge amount. Labour's got a huge job to do. But in terms of the opposition, we had someone who famously filibustered votes on not giving temporary workers equal rights as permanent workers, against same-sex marriages, said things like we should get rid of cycles to make more room for cars, things that I'm sure many of us wouldn't agree with. So Why should we vote Labour again? What's different this time around? How is Labour going to be better this time around?
And then, there he is, yeah. Microphone's just there.
Hi there. I'm a local candidate for Mayor here, plus I work for your colleague Laura Smith, MP of Crewe and Nantwich. What my question here is, recent attacks in New Zealand, which has been caused by Islamophobic, which is mass around the world. Yesterday, I don't know whether you're aware, there's 4 mosques attacked in Birmingham. Stoke-on-Trent was the home of the BNP, the EDL, just recently come in the winter for their march. As a young Muslim, as a young Labour member, what are we doing to decrease this hatred towards us, towards my brothers and sisters in this country, and plus my brothers and sisters in Palestine, in Yemen, and the Saudi Arabia atrocities that's happening there? What are we doing to decrease this hatred towards Muslims? Because yesterday's Birmingham is not far from here. What we're going to see in the next 2 weeks is people are going to come to Stoke-on-Trent and attack our mosques. And this is really, I feel like it's a really emotional topic to me, because I've been racially abused through my university years, racially abused growing up as a young Muslim in Stoke-on-Trent. What are we doing to get people's voices heard? What are we doing to divide this hatred? Because it's not good. And what we're going to see is a massive increase of Britain First, UKIP, and Conservatives, and the mass media, like the Daily Mirror over here. They're quick to promote Islamic terrorism, but when it comes to Christian terrorism, they like to call them mental health. So we need to address this issue. And when it comes to attacking Jeremy, it's first on their agenda. When it comes to attacking Christian terrorism, it's on their 10th page or something. It's a disgrace, the mass media who are present in this room, and also who you guys face on a daily basis. So what are we doing to decrease this hatred towards Muslims? What are we doing to decrease the rise of BNP, the EDL, and the Britain First in towns like Stoke-on-Trent? And what are we doing to promote the voices of young Muslims like myself around the country?
Thank you. I think he's one out. Well, the issue from the woman in the front there with regards to farming and farmers. I live in a constituency in Northumberland, and it's one of the biggest counties in the country, and it's mostly rural. I live on the coastal area, the most deprived area, and one of the most deprived areas in the country, former industrial area. And I understand clearly what you said, by the way, with regard to farmers. There's this popular misconception that every farmer is a millionaire and they've got lots of money, but the reality is, some of them are, but the reality is because of the hard work of the people who work on the farms, and other farmers as well who are struggling greatly. And we recognise that, and we've had discussions at all levels within the party with regards to how do we, basically, what messages, what positive messages, what policies can we develop in order to pull in the rural community? Because it is important, and there's lots of people, and I think what you say is right, that these people are undecided. And and they've got a right to say, well, what will the party do for me? What will the Labour Party do? So we're obviously in the crucial stages of developing new policies for inclusion in the next manifesto. We could have an election pretty soon. We really could. And that sort of thing is definitely on the agenda. I can give you that guarantee, and the discussions are taking place within the party to address the issues which you raise. So thanks very much for that question. The referendum, I understand what you're saying. I think people need, honestly, people need to calm about the referendum, need to calm about what position the country's in with regards to Brexit. Because, we're going to all have to live together after whatever happens. And if anybody can tell me what's going to happen even tomorrow, that'd be brilliant. Because if any politician, anybody else tells you that they understand what the next steps are, they're telling you lies. And I'm being serious. So I understand what you're saying with regards to how do we develop the argument following that, what we do. But we have made honestly, we've got to have tolerance with each other, because the beauty of the Labour Party, the beauty of society, which I'm proud to be part of, is that we should have this tolerance. We should have the ability to discuss with each other opposite views, but do it in a constructive way, in a non-insulting way, in a non-toxic way. And if you disagree, you disagree. And I think that's the message I would give with regard to my colleagues in the Commons as well. It's not easy. And listen, I'm honoured to be an MP. It's a privilege to be an MP. I'm accountable to the people who vote for me. But it's difficult, I'm getting emails from one side saying, Lavery, you're a great MP, but I'll never vote for you again because you support this. And then I'm getting emails from you saying, I've voted Labour all my life and I'll never vote for you again because you've said this. On Brexit, if everybody's true to their word, I'll be lucky to get 5 votes at the next election. So we've got to find a way forward. Because we're not all horrible people. We've been faced with a horrendous situation in the Commons with regards to Brexit. We cannot discuss these issues we've all been discussing today because it's all Brexit, 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 Brexit. But understanding we need all of the, obviously, 663 votes for Jack Berriton. You say, I'm sorry, but you said everybody knows who he is. I didn't know who he was until you mentioned, is he an MP? I'm nearly true. Anyway, and listen, my good colleague there, you're absolutely right. I mean, where I live, I keep saying where I live because very similar in many ways to this area. I live in a coalfield community. I've never ever been in a mosque. I haven't even been in a synagogue before. I rarely go to a church other than for funerals or marriages or christenings. I think everybody is absolutely the same, regardless of colour, regardless of religion. Everybody is the same. And that's the way I like to treat people in life. And that's the way we should treat each other in life. And what's happening in terms of Islamophobia is absolutely outrageous. And I'll give you a commitment, sir, honestly. We'll do everything we can within the Labour Party, everything we can to root it out of the party and root it out of society as well. There isn't any room in the Labour Party. And on our roots here, there's a good friend of mine who's been outspoken with regards to the horrendous situation with anti-Semitism. We'll root anti-Semitism out of the Labour Party. We'll root Islamophobia out of the Labour Party. We'll root all forms of fascism out of the Labour Party because there isn't any room for it in our party. And it will be difficult. It will be difficult. There's not much more in life that I dislike as the EDL or the Football Lads Alliance. There isn't much more in life that I really dislike. But it's not just up to MPs in the Palace of Westminster to defeat this. When you see racism, when you see any form of fascism on the streets, don't walk by on the other side. Tackle it, whether it's nose to nose. And that's the only way. That's the only way we'll defeat these horrendous, abhorrent problems that we are experiencing right across the country with regards to all forms of discrimination.
Okay, thank you very much, Ian, for those very strong words, and I think they are really important words that we come together as a country. But from us, I just want to say a big thank you again to you in Stoke-on-Trent for hosting the launch of the English local government election campaign for the Labour Party. We've got a few weeks ahead of us of knocking on doors, of selling that message of hope that it does not have to be like this, and believe in our values. And you know what? I think that with our message of hope, with our policies and belief in what we can do as socialists to change our society for the better, we can not only win more seats and more councils on the 2nd of May, that real prize is still ahead of us. A Labour government, a transformational Labour government that will rebuild this country for the many and not the few. So keep up the good work campaigning, and let's get there on the 2nd of May and whenever that general election comes. Thank you very much.